where we discuss all things of Earth and outer space, where we divine to pass the time, and no one can put us down or in our place. Grab your tea leaves or your spirits and gather around. The embers are glowing, warm flames abound. The hallowed hearth welcomes you now.
Welcome to the hallowed hearth, where the veil grows thin, forgotten legends awaken, and every flickering flame has a story to tell. For centuries, stories of vampires, restless spirits, haunted castles, and ancient curses have lingered in the shadows of our collective imagination. But behind every legend lies a spark of truth, a whispered tale, a forgotten journal, a place where history and the supernatural intertwine. Tonight, we journey into that liminal space between folklore and fact. Joining me on our adventure tonight, as always, is Rachel Ravensvale. Hello, Rachel.
Hello.
And Haley Hansen. Hello, sweet sister.
Ah! I couldn't help myself. They're not going to stay very long, I can tell already, but still.
Oh my gosh. So good. Oh my gosh. Okay, so our guest tonight isn't simply a historian or a best-selling author. He is the great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker, the visionary whose masterpiece Dracula forever transformed the world's understanding of the vampire. Yet, as our guest would soon discover, the story behind the novel is every bit as mysterious as the Count himself. Driven by curiosity and perhaps a calling from the past, he has followed Bram Stoker's footsteps through haunted libraries in Ireland, windswept abbeys in Whitby, forgotten castles in Scotland, and the mist-covered mountains of Transylvania. Along the way, he's uncovered hidden research, long-lost manuscripts, missing chapters, forgotten folklore, and compelling evidence that Bram's inspiration reached far beyond fiction, into the realms of superstition, spiritualism, second sight, and the occult. His own journey has been marked by strange experiences, uncanny discoveries, and the enduring question that has captivated seekers for generations. Where does history end? And where does the legend begin? As the embers glow and the veil grows thin, we'll explore the real origins of Dracula, the haunted places that shaped Bram Stoker's imagination, the folklore that gave birth to one of literature's greatest monsters, and whether the supernatural may have influenced the man who created him. So light a candle, settle in close to the hearth, and join us as we welcome internationally best-selling author, researcher, and guardian of the Stoker legacy, Dacre Stoker. Hello and welcome.
Hi there. Well, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's great. Great to be here. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This is like a dream come true for us.
Right?
Well, I realize I'm in the right place. I mean, seriously, when you were saying those things, Katie, so many times people just look at my great-granduncle and want to go straight to, Dracula. Where did he get Dracula? Where did he get the name? As opposed to things that were going on in the time when he was growing up, when he was influenced, and the occult, spiritualism, and these other things that were very predominant in society, in Bram's life. And I know that's a big part of your podcast. And so that's why it's cool to be here, to be able to talk stuff with three experts, people that are very interested in those elements that I can share with you guys tonight.
Well, and I'm so excited because I have this book.
Oh, yeah.
These are all like lesser known Bram stories. And
Yeah, well,
Dracula's Guest, if you guys have not read it.
we here's what we got to start with is, first of all, Rachel or Haley, have you either even heard of Dracula's Guest, or any of your listeners? Anybody?
I don't think
I had not
heard
until I
of it.
found this book. Yeah.
So back to Katie. What do you have you read it yet?
Oh yes, yes. It was
Okay.
the first story I read on my other channel.
So what did you glean from that story, as far as what was it about, just generally?
So
And-
it actually fills in a couple of holes
Yeah.
from Dracula. If you
Yeah.
are reading things and going, I'm not quite sure how we got here. You
Mhm.
need to read this. It's like how do I describe it? It's like trying to recreate your mom's recipe, but you don't have that one ingredient. So it's almost right. And then
Was-
you figure out what the ingredient is, and you're like, okay.
Was there, in that volume, did there happen to be sort of an inscription or a prelude by Bram's widow?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the hint. It was published 2 years after Bram died. So Florence was left with a bunch of stuff,
Okay.
and she moved homes, and researchers have found, I didn't discover it, but I found a good friend of mine, Professor John Edgar Browning, found it and made it available to me, the list of books that she sold at auction. Now, tell me how cool that is when you figure out, this famous author, what was in his library that she wanted to discard. I mean, he had a lot of books, and they just couldn't move with all these books. But when in this day and age, we are defined by what we watch on TV. What are you watching on streaming, right? Those days, it's your library.
Mhm.
What are you made up of? The people you hang out with, the societies and clubs you're a member of, and your books.
Mhm.
And Bram had these books, and they were all sold. So I could tell which books he had, what influenced him. And this one, though, stayed with Florence Stoker, and she had it published as, and I don't want to take Katie's thunder, as a previously unpublished portion of Dracula. And I can tell you now, beyond a shadow of doubt, that the research that I've done with a good friend of mine who's now deceased, Robert 18 Basang, that chapter that you have was once part of Dracula.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
And
so
our theory, and we published it in this book, Dracula Annotated for the 125th Anniversary, which is a couple years ago, published by Hellbound Books. It was the original chapter 2 of Dracula. Now, why do I know that? Because when J.D. Barker and I were doing our research for Dracul, the prequel to Dracula, we talked our way into the Paul Allen estate out in Seattle, who owns the Dracula typescript. Now, the Dracula typescript, allow me to just digress, was the actual thing that Bram handed to a typist, his handwritten manuscript. She then typed it up, put in the bin, the handwritten one, that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But the typed one went to the editor, and they sat down together and did some crossouts, did some additions, did some spelling corrections. So Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, who's also no longer living, collects all kinds of cool stuff like this, puts a few pages of it on display at the Museum of Popular Culture in Seattle. And every now and then, serious researchers like JD and I got to go and see the whole thing. We had a couple hours, no phones, no cameras, pencil only, white gloves, notepads only, signing NDA that we can't take any pictures. We can just, what we write down, we're allowed to use. And we found that the whole thing started on page 102.
Oh my.
So that means 101 pages were gone.
Yeah.
And then the prelude that you have, Katie, says that that all this stuff was excised due to length from Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing we think is taken out. And then I was cross-referencing to Bram Stoker's Dracula notes. Now that's on the other side of the country. They live in Philadelphia. They were also sold by Bram's widow. So they ended up somehow in the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia, and they list all kinds of interesting things, but you have to really know what you're looking for. And we found a whole series of letters that were going to make up chapter 1. So what was happening, if you think about this, Jonathan Harker ends up going to Transylvania. That's what Katie read in Dracula's Guest. It's him stopping off in Munich on the way.
Mm-hmm.
So skill testing question. Why was Jonathan Harker going to Castle Dracula in the first place? What was his reason? Anybody know?
He was supposed to, I think Dracula was looking to purchase a property.
Mhm.
He was going there essentially to sell him the.
Yeah, no, you're right. He was closing the deal. He was the solicitor to sign all the papers. So don't you think there was a lot of letters back and forth before that?
Yeah.
So nobody found the letters, but we found Bram listing letter, Count Dracula to Peter Hawkins back to Dracula, all these. So he was so detailed that he listed all the letters that were going to make up this chapter. And I'm assuming they were written because I think they were part of the missing 101 pages.
That's crazy.
So we've got all these letters, about 16 letters. Then we have Harker actually stopping en route because Bram used accurate train schedules. That's one of the books that he found in the London Library, the exact train schedules to travel all across Europe and even go into Transylvania. He has to stop in Munich overnight, and weird stuff happens. And then later that night, chapter 3, he actually goes to the opera. The night at the opera in Munich, where Bram and Sir Henry Irving actually went themselves, and they watched the play The Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman is Wagner's play about the cursed ship.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bram Stoker is the type of guy that all the research that he did and the ship he saw and heard about in Whitby, this was his way of foreshadowing that cursed ship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the character goes off to, and this is very Victorian, the Munich dead house.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, people in the Victorian era were fascinated with dead bodies, and they used to lay them out to make sure they weren't buried prematurely. So in Munich, they had them lying on these marble biers with all sorts of beautiful flowers for the smell. And Bram had a little subplot going in his notes that a body was going to come alive in the Munich dead house. So unfortunately, it's gone.
Yeah.
The only part of this remains is chapter 2, Dracula's Guest, and I highly recommend it. If you are listening tonight and you want to know where to get it for free, bramstoker.org is a free website with everything Bram ever wrote in public domain. Or you could buy Robert A.T. Bissang's and my Dracula annotated for the 125th, and it not only has the missing chapters, but all kinds of annotations and inside scoops to what took us about 2 years to give you insight into Dracula. So
Amazing.
that was long-winded, but thank you, Katie, for bringing up Dracula's Guest. One of the cooler stories that is sort of on the periphery of Dracula-dom.
Well, there were just stories I wasn't expecting. Like the Crystal Cup does not feel Stoker, but it's just so good. Like, yeah, the non-Dracula-y stuff is just as compelling, just as well written. I mean,
that's one of his earliest too. You know, when you read that one, you think this is the guy that wrote, you know, Dracula and Mystery of the Sea and Jewel of Seven Stars, Lair of the White Worm. The Crystal Cup, he was still a really young, you know, up and coming author. So that was, you know, kind of rough, you know, as far as polish goes. But it was, you know, really sort of out there and weird as far as a, you know, as a horror and supernatural kind of story goes.
Yeah,
That sounds incredible.
But you can then see the evolution, right? Of how he was from a young writer, what he evolved to, kind of like what inspired him along the way.
You're right. Let's delve into this though, because I can't stand it in this crowd with you three, and the whole concept of occult and spiritualism and all this. So we just got to, I'm going to frame this, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, or if I'm, if you think I'm on the right track, because if I think whenever you look at an author, what influences him, and obviously, what influences you three when you do prepare for your podcast, what is it that, gets you guys going? Well, back in the day, this whole concept of religion and science was beginning to percolate, right? Religion was ruling everything, ruling life and ruling death. And you go to church, no matter what religion, and by golly, the guy in the pulpit, whatever religion it was, they were telling you how to run your life and how to be good in life. So in death, you'll have a nice place to go. And then Charles Darwin came along and wrote Origin of the Species. He actually discovered the vampire bat at the same time. And that was in an article that Bram found. But that rocked the whole world of science versus religion, creation versus evolution. So people were thinking, no, wait a sec. Is that guy on Sunday telling me the truth? What does really happen? How do we come about? What happens to our bodies after death? And so these secret societies were starting. People were doing seance. People were touching the spirits and connecting, and Arthur Conan Doyle and others who were very well-known and respected doctors, and Mark Twain even. So this was a time that Bram's mind was also struggling between everything he was brought up to do, which was being a legal clerk and being very narrow-minded and legal side of things, which is just the rules, please, versus he was a real thinker, and he was a philosopher, and he was a historian. He was the head of the Philosophical Society, the Historical Society. He was an actor. He was a painter, all sort of garnered at Trinity College. So this is this side of Bram that I've come to really understand, and it pops out in Dracula, the detail-oriented solicitor, young Harker, but also the mystical guy like Van Helsing, trying to answer the questions of the world, like Dr. Seward, through science and proof. So if you made a triangle about those three things, those are the forces bouncing around Bram Stoker as he goes through life. So a lot of his writing has these little supernatural elements. Egyptology was huge during the Victorian era. People were bringing back this stuff and curses and all these symbols. It was really exciting and interesting time in history, and it really had an effect on Bram. So I'm going to slow down for a sec, and I want you guys to give, tell me what you think about that and your favorite writers and what that era has really done for the occult, for witches and seances and all that cool stuff.
If I can jump in real quick, what you described right there seems like the three of us. I'm gonna lose my fangs real quick so I can talk to you. But that's very much our triangle of perspective here. We have the one who's very, very deep in the paranormal. We have me from a religious background, and I'm kind of the crossover into the folklore and the interesting otherisms that we're not really we dive into and explore them. And then there's Katie, who's our bookworm, and she's the one that's so deeply rooted in culture and in literary references and but those kind of frame what we've got here as far as the show goes. And I think that Stoker and all of the authors that you just described absolutely got us where we are today. It's almost a revival time, because there's been such eras, especially in the US, where a lot of this stuff got repressed. And you think, man, we have to go back so far to revive this kind of stuff just to have these conversations again. And we're finally able to talk about it as a form of resistance for, that church head that's selling you things that you don't necessarily think are morally right, maybe.
Yeah, but I almost think we kind of flipped a bit, right? Because I think that for a while, like, science has taken like a big, like, we want proof, we want science. Mm-hmm. And then there's this sort of uprising of like spiritual, like trying to get back to that spiritualism kind of movement of the 1800s, with the resurgence of paranormal investigating and really delving into like the mythology of cryptids and what's happening. Kind of, so it's interesting where we're replaying the same themes.
Yeah,
nearly
Well, but a lot of those authors also dealt with, what do you do with the responsibility that you have now that you have the knowledge? It's not just enough to know or to discover or to question. Are you going to be the highest person on the food chain with that information, with that knowledge?
Yeah, no, that's it. And I think, back in the day, there was great respect for these free thinkers. Freemasonry started, and then real kind of weird fringe groups, Order of the Golden Dawn, Hellfire Club, all this stuff. But you got to be in private to really open up, because it still wasn't totally accepted in society to be, thinking all these sort of wild things. And yet, in Dracula, you have this main character, Van Helsing, who epitomizes the open-mindedness of not only he was a lawyer, he was a doctor, and a scientist. And so all of these elements of what he brought to the table for this band of heroes was combining these things with a great understanding and respect for the old ways.
Yeah.
And that's how he pointed out to Dr. Seward, which I think Bram, talking to all of his three brothers, my great-grandfather being one of the doctors in the family, that the scientists are okay, but you can't just rely, I think, on Haley said, on just proof. You've got to be able to believe in things and understand things. And if you don't, you still need to have faith. Faith is believing what you know ain't so. Mark Twain, right? And Bram Stoker actually slid that into the novel. I once heard of an American who so defined faith as that belief in things you know not to be true. And that's all part of Van Helsing trying to explain to Seward, okay, we gave Lucy a blood transfusion last night. This morning, there's not very much blood left in her. She's pale, she's cold, but there's not a big pile of blood on the floor. Yeah. And Seward could not understand the concept of a vampire coming in the window and sucking the blood. So he was like baffled. And he was like, I don't understand. You must believe in things you know to be untrue. And so that, I think, what Rachel's saying is, we still want to understand things we can't explain, the paranormal, the presence of ghosts, and potentially things that we can't prove. Doesn't mean they're not there. It's just that we can't necessarily connect with them or adjust to them or see them with our present senses.
And if you kind of think about it, it's this age-old concept of things that have unexplained consequences, like illness, without the knowledge of germs. Like, that's it, like in modern terms, like what cryptids are to me. There are things that I believe have been documented, and we can see the explanation of occurrences that are repeated. And if you look at patterns, you can say, okay, well, something happened here, and they're in these certain places during these certain times, but we don't see anything, and we haven't had the documented evidence. But when the technology catches up, you might catch a Bigfoot on camera, or whatever the creature, whatever it might be, in the same way that science has discovered that there are parasites and bacteria and all these other things that would have seemed like witchcraft or woo-woo to people hundreds of years ago.
If you had slid those vampire fangs back on, it would be perfect, because I'm going to now say, because Rachel was talking about Salem, I talked about that article that Bram saw in the New York World newspaper about Charles Darwin discovering the vampire bat. Okay, Haley's getting ready for this now. Okay. This,
and you do it.
In these notes was this newspaper article all about the New England vampire scare of the late 1800s, and mentioned not Haley, but Mercy Brown, Sarah Tillinghast. But maybe Haley was there. Who knows? She's looked pretty young, but
she was.
She could have been right there. And folks, I know you three know this, but this was all another communicable disease that even people in the late 1800s didn't understand about the germ theory of tuberculosis. And it was written in the newspaper article, but Bram picked up on this and actually borrowed passages from that newspaper article. So I know he read it. Some people think, oh, he probably based loosely Lucy after Mercy Brown because she was the young lady, and so it's possible, but not, because there's actually a Westerner family in Ireland that we think he based it on. But it's nothing like having a second, but also nothing like having something in a newspaper to make Uncle Bram feel like, hey, when I get this book published in the US, I'm going to sell a lot because they still believe this stuff.
Right.
So no, absolutely. So he actually pulled out this part where Charles Darwin said, when we were in Chile, these big bats would come out of the trees and drink blood from the cattle. And so Bram simply changed a couple of names. Quincy Morris said, yes, when we were in South America, these big bats came out of the trees and one drank so much blood from my horse, I had to put her down.
Wow.
So the New England vampire scare, there you go. Thank you for the backup, Haley. Definitely influenced Bram Stoker, and he was well aware of it. He came to America 8 times, traveled all over the country. And that Quincy Morris I just mentioned, that's Buffalo Bill Cody. He was very good friends with Buffalo Bill Cody, and he used him as he used a lot of real people for bits and pieces of inspiration into other main characters. So it's not like verbatim, but it was many elements of Buffalo Bill Cody make their way into Elias Hutchison in the short story The Squaw, Grizzly Dick in The Shoulder of Shasta, and then Quincy Morris and Dracula. And they were actually good friends. Irving and Stoker helped Buffalo Bill bring his Wild West show over to England, London, Glasgow, and so on. Small world.
That was the funniest thing to see. Yeah, I went, probably middle school, we went out west and saw, Buffalo Bill's grave. And yeah, there's a Bram Stoker reference, and you're like,
yeah, what's that connection there? Come on, guys.
That's so cool, though.
Yeah.
But Katie, in middle school, you'd already read Dracula. You knew, though, right?
I mean, I didn't. Yeah, I got started early. Yeah.
All right. So listen, I got to tell you, you guys did great pre-promotion for this. So hit me up with questions about where did Bram come up with Dracula? What I call it the soup. Quincy Morris was a soup of a number of different people. Van Helsing, a number of different people. So start hitting me with some of these. What were the makeups of some of these characters or places in the novel?
Well, see, okay, so Mina is like, I think we all at some point wanted to be Mina. Because she's, yeah, like she's every girl, but she's like a final girl, and she's like all these cool things that in the Victorian era she wasn't supposed to be. Strong and like willing to say this isn't right and question things. So I guess what was Bram's widow like? Is she more like a Mina? Was she an inspiration for that?
Part ways, but it's his mother. Bram's mother, Charlotte Stoker, was a kick-ass, strong female rights advocate. She not only raised 7 kids, they did have the help of a nanny. There really was the nanny, Ellen Crone, who was a character in JD in my book. But she, and again, put this in perspective, in the late 1870s, she kind of forced her way, I'd say forced, I don't know if she had to literally push the door open, but put pressure on the all-male Social and Statistical Inquiry Society in Dublin, Ireland, to march in there and deliver papers. And the delivering the paper is making a speech. That's what they called it in the day. She'd deliver a paper on the education of the deaf and the mute, how to judge if somebody is criminally insane. So two major papers on people with mental health illnesses, and better conditions for young women in workhouses. So the workhouses are, if you're an orphan or you're down and out or whatever, you work, but they treat you like crap. So this was the modern woman. And I don't know if she ever learned to type like Mina did. I know Bram did, and he had a traveling typewriter, but she was very well read, wrote a lot of letters, and she really kept a big family together. And if you think about Mina, everything you just said, Katie, right on, she ruled She was the glue that held the band of heroes together. And Van Helsing recognized it when he said, there are lights and there are darknesses. You were one of the lights of all lights. And she was the one that figured out how to correlate all the notes that were on Dr. Seward's recording phonograph and typed it up in like triplicate and handed it to Van Helsing to give to the band of heroes, the guys who are sitting having their cigars and their brandy at about the halfway point in the book, and so they could figure out what the hell was going on. And oh my God, when you were able to look at Jonathan's notes from the castle and Dr. Seward's notes from Renfield and what he was talking about Count Dracula, and also the medical stuff about transfusions and this and that and historical stuff, it had to come together to make sense. Up until that point, all the different characters had these different ideas separately. And Maina brought it all together. When it's interesting, she wasn't the rich socialite Lucy. She's the orphan school mistress who had her act together.
Yeah.
That
So-
leads me to the next question.
Yep.
So most people think of Dracula, they associate it with. Sorry, the lisp is killing me. But when most people think of Dracula, they associate it with Transylvania. But like you just brought up, there might have been a lot more Ireland involved in Dracula's transformation. Can you take us into that some of that world of the Celtic folklore that might have inspired the story?
So boy, we could do a whole show. Ireland is like incredible when it comes to witchcraft and magic, religions. The Celts, I mean, it is just so ripe with great cautionary tales from the fairies, the banshees, the pukas, Abertac, Derdug. It just goes on and on. So yes, there were already in the Irish culture wonderful cautionary tales about, and it's funny if you really look at it. Religion is telling you how to lead a good life, do the right thing, and so do these folklores. It's basically, do everything good, don't stray from your husband or your wife, work in the fields and you're supposed to do all these things, and the bad thing from under the bed or the boogie person from the woods won't come and suck your blood and kill you. And they're all just different forms. They're animals, there are supernatural. There's, the old lady at the end of town, the witch. So there's all that stuff that just makes the storytelling so vivid and help people do the right thing. So even though, and I say this so many times, Bram didn't have to write any of this stuff in his notes to have it part of his psyche. He was very aware of it. And if you see it in some of his other writings, it does pop up. One of them is the lair of the white worm. He was very aware of the worm of the Lamberton worm. So there were vampires. Yeah, Derdug was this young lady who was treated terribly and kind of sold off to this horrible guy and couldn't marry who she wanted, so she commits suicide. And if you commit suicide, that's a mortal sin, so you can't be buried, and you're a vampire. And Abertac, this guy had to bury upside down about 4 or 5 times. And so that you're absolutely right. The influence on Bram came early, but it was already ingrained. So when he started his serious research into these newspapers and into all these books in the London Library and reading Emily Gerard, so another female from Scotland who really was a person who did her research in Transylvania, provided Bram with all the stuff he needed to move the book to Transylvania. So you've got a question that popped up. Do you want to just deal with them as they pop up here?
Yes.
I just thought this was such a good question.
Great question.
It's great. Do we know why Stoker decided to write the novel with the epistolary style versus traditional narrative? And he never came out and said, this is why we did it. We make assumptions. And the assumption is it was done once before in Gothic literature in a book called The Women in White by Wilkie Collins. So Bram didn't invent the epistolary style, right? But it was out there. Bram himself wrote a journal, a diary, He wrote newspaper articles, right? He was also trying to create the effect in the story that it's real. And you could try to get away with that by just third-person narrative, or you do this epistolary style. And it's like the four of us on the screen right now are trying to tell a story, and it starts off where we each write letters to each other, or write letters in your diary, or keep a journal, and the fifth person comes along and starts reading what we have all said and tries to figure out what's going on. And that's also Bram, because he likes to challenge people to really think. And so if you're listening and you have not read this novel yet, I highly recommend you try it, because it will challenge you to think in terms of, and as a writer says, POV, from the point of view of Katie, or of Rachel, or of Haley, or of Dacre. Whose point of view? Where are they coming from? What's their background? Why am I writing it this way? And then you really have to think and pull it together. So it was conscious of Bram, because of the style. His writing style matched the outcome, was to make this book seem strangely real by all these accounts from, and also real places, right? Newspapers from real places.
Yeah, so he was writing from real life. I know that we kind of talked about, like, we put out this week on the socials, and I would really love to go into Dracula versus, like, when Bram Stoker wrote about who Dracula was, what kind of character this was, as opposed to what a vampire is like in modern. It seems like they've definitely strayed.
They're not sparkly?
Huh?
They're not sparkly?
Yeah, they're not sparkly.
They didn't start that way. So okay, let's do that. But let me ask this: which one of you want to try to describe the sort of Bram's Count Dracula? How would you just sum up Bram's Count Dracula?
I can kind of do it.
Yeah, go for it.
So he was definitely an older gentleman, much older than they depict a vampire now, right? Now is more youthful. He was older. He was that had like pointy ears. He had white hair. He also had like hair on his hands, and he was just a more kind of, grotesque kind of creeper.
Damn.
How about that? Is that about right?
That's about right.
Yep.
Yeah. So I bought this because this was pretty much the way I read the description of Bram in the book. He's not a Christopher Lee or a Bela Lugosi. You don't see a dinner jacket. You do see some red here, which was not from the novel, but the friend of mine who painted it for me couldn't resist. He said that's the homage to Christopher Lee having the red lining that started off in 1958. But you're right. This was a, revenant from the grave, and he started off in the novel as this old guy, with a really cold hand but a really strong grip, and not attractive, terrible breath, bad breath, and the hairy palms, which sort of enters into the concept of he had elements of werewolf in him.
Yeah. I've always thought that.
Which is very different, because now they put, like, they've had them in separate categories, like
Yes.
that, so Bram had him as a shapeshifter, right? He could be werewolf, he could be bat, he could be mist.
Mice.
Now it's like they
Yeah.
have them as opposing. They're almost like they have where the vampires and werewolves are like at war with each other, like in Underworld.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, I'll tell you, super creative. I think that's great. It really was. But you got to think, this is almost 130 years ago, and he started with something that came right out of the basically the vampire myth that was perpetuated by different treaties that he found in from the 1800s in the libraries. And then Emily Gerard comes along and writes about what she found when she moved to Transylvania in 1884. So there was no sexy runway model or a hunk or somebody from next door. This was the real thing. Okay, so let's fast forward because we got to get some more other things in tonight. So the book is written 1897. Bram dies in 1912, and he does actually and also for the record, he did protect the dramatic rights of the novel Dracula by cutting and pasting two early editions of Dracula onto a stage script, and had 11 people at the Lyceum Theater read that one script on one reading. It wasn't a play, it was a staged reading only to protect the dramatic rights. But that was gold. He got a certificate from Lord Chamberlain's office that was one performance, that had a playbill. That's all you needed to protect the dramatic rights of your book.
That's
So
so cool.
then he dies, and Nosferatu comes out in 1922. So 10 years after he dies, his widow finds out, holy crap, these guys in Germany who have a much more advanced film industry than does England or America, and they make a movie that is said based freely on Bram Stoker's Dracula. Long story short, it's a great non-speaking film, but it was deemed by the German court system after Florence got the Independent Society of Authors to help her sue them. It was deemed a copyright infringement because Bram had protected the copyright. She didn't make any money. Some of the copies were destroyed, some of them were saved. And now we move on to she's now determined to turn Dracula into a stage play because she knew that she could do that in England and she could use the money. Now this, ladies, is where that guy I just showed you turned into the fancy guy with the dinner jacket and the white tie. Why is that? For one reason, Hamilton Dean, who adapted the book, had to have the Count freely integrate into London society. And you're not going to do it looking like that guy I just held up. But if you want to be invited in to the Westerner house or Lord Godalming's house, you're in the dinner jacket and tails. And also, you're not going to be this ugly guy from the back alley. You're going to be someone who's pretty suave and debonair. Enter Bela Lugosi, who could not speak very good English at the time, so his lines were recited phonetically. And that's one more reason why Dracula was speaking, welcome, enter freely. And that stuck. He was from Hungary. So this is the beginning of what we in the biz call it the transformation or the humanization of Dracula. And we begin to see him take on more human traits because he's got to live the test of time. Now, the very first Dracula was a guy called Edmund Blake. The second one was Charles Morel. And then comes along, not Charles Morel. Okay, just a sec. That's the guy that wrote the play. It skips my memory right now. But Bela Lugosi was the third guy to play him. And then Bela Lugosi played him for a very long time, 1927. And then he got the part. The play had come to America. And then when 1931 rolls around and Universal pays Mrs. Stoker for the dramatic rights to the play, that's when Bela begs for the job and gets the starting role. So that's the beginning of the cleansing of the humanization of Dracula. So now it's your turn to tell me, where do you guys like? I mean, and just because they're different doesn't mean they're good, bad, or indifferent, but where do you like where the Draculas have gone since Bela Lugosi?
Well, I'll jump in real quick because what you just mentioned brought up such great memories for me. The first time I really encountered Dracula was seeing a live production in a very small playhouse in West Virginia growing up in about 6th grade or something. And it was so powerful. It altered my brain chemistry. I loved the costuming and the turn of phrase and the effects that they put on telling the story and bringing it to life. And I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I've been obsessed with vampires ever since, really, probably even before that, just because it's so ingrained in everything that we see in media. But that visceral feeling of heads being ripped off and wolves outside the door and the transfiguration of bats, it was so cool. But yeah, there's no bad iterations. I mean, I'm sure there are, but I have a fondness for anything related, whether it's technically bad or not, just because it's shaped my personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff.
But I kind of like how Francis Ford Coppola went back to make it a little bit more like Bram Stoker wrote, right? Because he had the Count when Keanu Reeves, character as he gets there, he's old, right? He's the old man. He has his hair up. He's not really attractive, just like
Gross.
Yeah,
just
pretty
like
grotesque.
Holly Jeffords said there in the comments. He's much more physically repulsive than the modern pop culture, but he starts to get younger as he's feeding. And that's the whole premise, right? Because he's sucking that life force, and he's rejuvenating and getting his powers back.
So you're a Gary Oldman fan. Obviously, I mean, look, I as an actor, I absolutely love Gary Oldman. I love Slow Horses right now, by the way. I'm just addicted to that. But I thought he's a great Dracula. I got a couple other questions, but Katie, have you got a favorite Dracula actor that played Dracula that we haven't said yet?
I probably fall in the Gary Oldman, but just the nostalgia, because I was 13 when that movie came out, so I had babysitting money, and like now I'm old. It's a PG-13 movie, but I can go without my parents, and but and of course everyone had a crush on Keanu Reeves at the time, and we all wanted to be Winona Ryder, so it was just like this wonderful crossover in that age. So it's just always stuck with me. But the new one that came out, was it 24, 25, 24?
The Luke Besson one, or
Yeah, the new one.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm dying to see it. I've heard so many people fall in love with it.
He's such a beast. Like, there is nothing dainty about him at all. It is such a complete 180 from all of like the other Draculas, vampires we've been served over the last 30, 35 years. Because he's just this hulking, like,
Okay, I know where we're going with this one. Okay.
But I mean, it's where you have where you have the Bram kind of and Gary Oldman kind of charismatic, suave, let me seduce you with my eyes and my voice kind of thing. This new one is, you're so scared because he is so powerful
too. Like Gary Oldman, he played the creepy, even if it was just his shadow in the background that they had.
Yeah.
Such good cinematography. Yeah.
So
everything was so subtle with him, where this new one is just very like in your face. This is what is happening. Like it. Yeah.
Feral.
Yeah.
I think feral, warrior like, predator like. So let's do this, because you've touched on something, and I don't want to answer my own question. What historical character did both Luke Besson and Gary Oldman sort of channel and bring into the story? And it wasn't just them; it's obviously the writers, but it's more than just Bram Stoker's Dracula.
It's very Vlad the Impaler.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now let's go back even farther, because they didn't start it. Any of you, you're probably all too young to know. It actually started with Dan Curtis in 1974, when Jack Palance actually played Dracula. And it was the first time Vlad the Impaler was introduced into the story as the backstory of where Dracula came from. Now, Bram Stoker did find the name Dracula in 2 books, both of them referencing Dracula of Wallachia, one calling him Vlad Dracula the Impaler. This is by James Samuelson, and the other by William Wilkinson, called him the Devil. And this one by Samuelson also called him the Devil. So I'm going to really shorten this part of my lecture up close. Bram was looking for, again, the soup. Remember, I've been telling you this throughout the evening. He's got an element of Vlad the Impaler, who's got a wonderful bloodthirsty background, most likely never drank a drop of blood in his life, but certainly impaled and everything else, right? But all the history, all the battles against the Ottomans and so on, they're all mentioned in the story. So there's no question he needed that. But he also had the visual imagery of Henry Irving, his boss, on stage for 27 years, playing the role of Mephistopheles, the assistant to the devil. And Bram was looking for a devil incarnate, somebody like Irving who commanded the stage. Vlad the Impaler called the devil. And one other element that I don't think I've ever mentioned on a podcast, because I've only got this about 2 or 3 months ago when it all kind of came together, the evil scientist. The evil scientist who is represented in the society at the time Bram was growing up and living in London, that his brother was very well aware of, the evil scientist doing vivisection experiments on animals, taking their skulls off live animals and doing poking their brains to see how things work, and then letting the poor animals die a miserable death, no antibiotics, and so on. And Thornley Stoker became an inspector of vivisection, and there were doctors that went to court that Thornley would bring to court, Bram's older brother, that helped him do all the medical parts of Dracula, that they would find these people that they were doing illegal vivisection. So when you read closely the elements of Dracula, where Dr. Seward is saying, "Oh, I'd love to know much more about this mental patient Renfield, if only the surgery was deemed necessary," and they looked at Count Dracula being, he's an evil scientist. What are his experiments? He's forcing Renfield to eat the bugs to build up life. So these are all the evil elements of the time. Dracula from the history books, Henry Irving of Dracula, and evil scientist all blended into the soup. And that's how it kind of came to Bram. And then it took till 1974 for Dan Curtis to make a movie, and then it sort of moved on from there. There was elements of that in Gary Oldman, in Luc Besson, and also Luke Evans in 2014, Dracula Untold. Was a whole film about how Vlad the Impaler became a vampire. Haley, you've seen the movie.
Yeah. I like that one. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. I thought it was to me, it was, hey, the gloves are off. Let's just say, how did Dracula become a vampire?
Yeah.
He did all the things that Bram mentioned in the folklore. He went up to the mountains, to the Sholomonts. The devil turned him. He went through this horrible ceremony. It is awesome.
It's cool. It's really cool.
So that's that transformation I'm looking for. And I just want to make sure we had time to say that, Vlad the Impaler has now been really sort of, it's the standard now. He is. There's no getting away from it. So when I lead these people to Romania, and I take Mysterious Adventure tours, and I go with Experience Transylvania, 2 different tours. One of them, this actually Halloween, Mysterious Adventure tours. We've got a vampire ball in Bran Castle, 5-day tour, 12-day tours. It's really fun because I'm showing people the real Vlad Dracula places where he lived, where he impaled, where he was killed, and so on, and then the real fictional places. So I think it's brilliant because now we can double the tourist industry in Romania by showing the 2 Draculas.
Yeah.
Okay.
But essentially, isn't Dracula ends up being good versus evil? If you're going to break it down, right? If you're saying Dracula is epitome of like the devil, evil, and then you have them trying to save, like humanity, then it's really essentially good versus evil.
I got to just say this because it's funny, but you're hit the nail on the head. I used to be a school teacher, and I've got good friends at a Catholic school in town here. And I said, look, I'd love to come and do one of my lectures to your kids, and then maybe you could make a fundraiser out of it and show the 92 Coppola film. And the principal said, "Oh, I don't think the father would like that." And I go, "What do you mean?" "Well, it's all the devil." I said, "Wait a sec. I mean, the devil loses at the end. Haven't you read the book? Haven't you seen it?" And so that sort of stuck with me. And then in 2012, my son, who is a religious and English major, we were in Dublin, Ireland, the 100th anniversary of Bram Stoker's death. We're at the same church with a big ceremony, the family's there, and we're all giving little talks. And the vicar says, "Mr. Stoker, have you got a copy of Dracula? We'd love to process down the aisle with a copy of Dracula." And my son goes, "Dad, in a church? Dracula?" And I always travel with one of these. This is a replica, for photo ops. And so they said, yeah, okay, let's hold that. And then somebody, an acolyte, was holding the Bible right next to it. Probably the only time in history the Bible and Dracula are marching down a Church of Ireland procession, and they're then placed up on the altar. And my son is going, where's the thunder? Where's the lightning? I know. And the vicar said, not to worry, in front of everybody. These two books, they're both the same. Where good wins out over evil at the end.
Yes.
So Rachel, that line has stuck with me. You're absolutely right. And even, confirmed by the vicar of St. Anne's Church in Dublin, Ireland.
That's crazy.
Wow.
I love
And the modern influences still continue. One of the greatest series that I've seen recently was Midnight Mass.
Oh,
Oh,
so good.
but it's, I mean, you could just tell that this was completely born under the influence of Dracula and the religious tension and turmoil and the overlay when, I don't want to spoil it, so if you haven't seen it yet, plug your ears, but the angel being the vampire, I was like,
that was such a
that's
good.
so beautiful.
I saw it
And
too,
Yeah.
so good.
Wasn't the writing really good? I mean, that to me, the way the writers extracted from the scriptures so many elements that had these subtle double meanings. And I'm just going to say one of them because we could go on this all night, because I'm with you. That's one of my favorite all-time non-Dracula vampire movies.
Yeah.
And that is, oh, he rises from the dead? What's the big deal? Jesus rose from the dead. What's the, I mean, tongue in cheek, but like that's what us vampires do, right? So that was just the tip of the iceberg, but I highly recommend if you're looking for something, 5-6 episodes. It's a slow burn.
It's a one day.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it is great.
Yeah.
So I know that one of the topics that we really love exploring here kind of touches on your research about Bram, and that he had a genuine interest in like mesmerism, spiritualism, second sight. How deeply involved do you believe he truly was?
Okay, so this is one of these little things where I put together what I call circumstantial evidence, right? I'm gonna kind of do what Bram did in Dracula, and you guys decide how it all comes together in the Dracula soup. All right. So where do we start? We have a researcher has found at Leeds University, I think she's found 26 letters that Bram wrote with people, very learned people, about, just call it general topics of the occult, interest in things in the occult. And that spans before he wrote Dracula and even after when he wrote Dracula. So it's a genuine interest in sort of non-traditional like views on life and death. Okay, so that's sort of number one. Number two, I think probably my second favorite book that Bram wrote, Dracula's one. Dracula's Guest doesn't really count because that's a part of it. But The Mystery of the Sea is a book he wrote when he was in Scotland. And he spent at least 11 summers in the Scottish town called Cruden Bay. At the time it was called Port Errol. It's north of Aberdeen. And it's one of these areas where you're getting close to the Highlands of Scotland. And where witchcraft and second sight and all this other great stuff just flourishes. Mm-hmm. And so Bram had met a person in this town who was generally referenced as a person that possessed second sight. And her name was Gormala. And she's mentioned in this story. And he actually published 2-chapter short story called The Seer. And then later he expanded it into the whole Mystery of the Sea. So again, go to bramstoker.org and read The Seer, and you'll see that Bram places himself as a character in Cruden Bay and has firsthand dealings with Gormala. And it's very respectful, okay, and very interested in, what is this and how does it affect me? And and he's beginning to think maybe he has some of this himself. So that's number two. Number three, I've been to Cruden Bay now a couple of times. I've got to know a wonderful guy there named Mike Shepard, a retired geologist who worked in the North Sea and the oil fields, who's researched into this himself. We actually wrote a book together called When Brave Men Shudder, about Bram Stoker's time in Cruden Bay and Slains Castle, the hidden history. That's the castle that's in Cruden Bay that Bram used for his layout of his fictional castle, Dracula. And Mike directed me to a number of things. One was a newspaper from Dundee, Scotland, where a writer by the name of Norval Scrimmanger, who in 1931 admitted that 25 years earlier, he went to a social gathering to meet Henry Irving, and Bram Stoker was there, but found Bram Stoker much more interesting because he sat in by the fireplace and regaled a few of us in his personal experiences with second sight. And so here are those two experiences that he's told to Mr. Scrimmanger, who he then, for whatever reason, waited 15 years to write this into his newspaper. And one of them was Bram was in Edinburgh, and he was visiting a friend, and the friend was a husband and wife, and the husband was out working, and the lady had the little child infant in arms and the little 5-year-old running around. And the little 5-year-old came in and said, and I forget what he said the child's name was, but she's not well, she's not playing, she's going to die. What? And it's like, no, don't be silly, the child is just fine. And this little girl was, no, she was whining away that she's going to die. And it was like, oh, come on, it's little kids. Bram went back home, had a nice tea with them. Next day, the baby died. And it wasn't ill, it didn't have croup, it just, boom, dead. So somehow Bram is equating this girl, this 5-year-old, having that second sight on her little sister. All right, so that's number one. Number two, it's even a little more weird. The Earl of Errol, who lives in Slains Castle, would invite the prominent people from the town, and Bram was a prominent guy. As a theater manager, he was a pretty high guy because Henry Irving was the most famous actor of his time. And if Bram comes on holiday in your little town, the uppity-ups want to have coffee with him, or in this case, invite him out to do pheasant shooting with the other high-up people in the town. So they give you a ghillie. It's like a guide who then loads your shotgun and hands it to you when it's time to walk around and wait for the pheasant to jump out of the bush, and then you shoot the thing, and then he hands you another one, take a second shot. So you get to hang out with your ghillie for the 4 or 5 hours you're walking through the bush and shooting and reloading. And you have a personal relationship. And they're talking about all kinds of things. And this guy is one of these people from the Highlands who believes in these things, the witchcraft and magic and sorcery and so on. And so Bram says to him, well, how is the Earl? Now, when I say this, I want the three of you to try to figure out what I'm talking about. Because the guide said about the Earl, he said, the veil is high on the Earl. Any of you know what he's referring to? The veil is high on the Earl. Katie said at the beginning of the show, you use that term about the veil.
Is thin. Yeah.
Between
this world and
the next. Yeah.
So if the veil is,
he's about to die.
Thank you. That's exactly what the ghillie is saying. And Bram said, oh, don't be silly. He's looking great. And so they went home, and Bram was there for another week, no sign of illness. The next year, Bram comes back for a summer holiday. He's invited to go out shooting again. And Bram requests the same ghillie. And he says, you were wrong. See, he's fine. Oh, no. The veil is higher still.
Oh, no.
And they had their shooting. They shot lots of pheasant. And within 2 days, they came home, and the Earl had an unexpected brain aneurysm and died. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like he had progressive cancer or something that the ghillie knew. It was just one of those things. So that's number two. The final thing I'm going to tell you, and that's why it's all cumulative with Uncle Bram, is the one book that Bram ever did a book review of that anyone's ever found. Again, it's John Edgar Browning that found this one in a New Zealand newspaper. That for whatever reason, they asked Bram to review a book by this guy called Norman McRae about second sight and witchcraft in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland.
Wow.
And so Bram reviewed the book with great respect and didn't poo-poo it, but just said, there's a lot of very realistic things here. So I'm just super paraphrasing a long review, but it is Bram showing that he had a great respect and and I can't say serious belief or what degree, but there was a certain amount of belief in all this stuff himself. So all of that together makes me think Bram was a bit of a mystical guy. He believed in other things, and I believe he lived by one of my favorite quotes in the novel Dracula. There are mysteries which men can only guess at, which age by age they may solve only in part. I think that that's Bram Stoker all summed up in one little quote.
Yeah, that's the little triangle right back
That's
there.
the triangle that, as Haley said, that's you three.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, watch the
Speaking of
comments are going to call us the Illuminati now because we're doing the triangles.
I was going to say, speaking of like the veil being thin, I know that you visited Whitby, Dublin, Cruden Bay, Transylvania. You've walked through all of these places, and where there's sort of like still echo with history and hauntings. Which location feels as though that the veil is the thinnest?
Well, each of them have different times. I mean, I got to tell you, when I'm in Whitby, and I was just there about a month ago, and I was actually writing something today about it for English Heritage magazine, that when the fog, when there's a heat inversion in Whitby, cold ocean, warm air, you get this incredible sea mist that flows off the ocean, enters to Whitby and kind of moves up the steps and surrounds Whitby Abbey. It is so ghost-like, and it's not just Bram or me saying it. The townspeople believe these are sort of the ghostly figures of those poor souls not resting at peace, died in marine tragedies, that are trying to seek a place to rest in peace. And there just happens to be a wonderful big churchyard up on top of the East Cliff, with graves that are empty, that have headstones, with your name on it, waiting for you to come back. That feels to me that the veil is lifted. And I've been there sometimes when that just sort of rolls in and just sort of, it's almost like, in a movie set when they turned on the smoke machine. It's so cool. That's one of the really awesome places. The other one is in Dublin, Ireland, in Marcia's library. I honestly believe I had an experience downstairs, and they say that Marcia's library, and you guys should check into this, that it is that is haunted by the Archbishop Marcia's daughter, who disobeyed her father, married somebody else, somebody that the father wanted and didn't want to marry, so on. So that I was down there getting ready to set up to do one of my audiovisual presentations, and weird things started happening with lights. The way they have lights that turn on when you're walking down a hall, and they turn on because of motion.
Right.
Well, they didn't turn on when I walked through. And so I was like blind. I had to pull up my phone and use just my phone to get through these 3 doors to get to this place, to set up my computer. And so then I found the switch and I turned it on. And it's so often these people say these things happen, but my freaking computer battery was dead. And I didn't happen to have one of the adapters, because my computer battery was I just juiced it up before I left my hotel room, because I knew I didn't have an adapter. I didn't need it for this 45-minute thing. And the battery was dead. And I know I'd shut the computer off. I didn't drain it in the 15 minutes it took to get there. And it just felt sort of cold and weird. And this lady came in, and as she walked it down the hall, all the freaking lights came on for her, but not for me.
Oh, they were teasing you for sure.
Yeah, I think, but it was not scary as much as it was just sort of enlightening. Like, okay, cool. I've had I had an interaction. So those are my top 2, Rachel. and I still look for more because, people think, oh, Romania, yeah, it's got great history. It's got, a lot of Vlad stuff, and it's where Bram set, some of the chapters. I don't know if there's a whole lot of witchcraft and stuff that goes on there. I do know in some of our tours we do have um, ceremonies with witches and so on in Hoyo Baciu Forest and these other cool places. I'm very open-minded, but I can't say I've had nothing like those two places that have been really tangible to me.
Well, we know, like, Celtic wise there's been stories and in history of witches, obviously, there, and they so believe, in all of kind of the UK area, they really truly believe that ghosts exist because they have all of these ancient these ancient locations and so much history to it, so much more than we have in the US. And really being paranormal investigator and going around all just the places here, like, I've encountered so much. I just think they're everywhere.
Well, they've also got more brutal and bloody deaths because they're so barbaric, going back 500 years rather than our 200 years, and more. So there's a lot more, there's a lot more material there to work with. So have any of you three been to England, Ireland, Scotland to sort of, okay, you guys got to get that on your list, because
it's on the list.
With your interests and your talents, you guys got to go there.
My husband was looking last night at your whole, like, tour that you're going to be doing over that way, and he was like, yeah, it's we could go. We would just have to pay $400 and something a month for we could finance it.
Well, that's one of the things that Mysterious Adventures Tour is doing is they're working with a company that you could pay monthly, as opposed to have to pay the $3,000 or something up front, and it's just trying to make it.
Is it like include everything in it?
Yes. Yes.
Airfare, hotel.
No, not the airfare, because one of the things about it, hotels, food, everything. But the reason we don't do airfare is we don't know where you're coming from, and some people will fly on a super budget airline. Some people like to fly first class. So it's just that's it. But you should really look into it. And I tell you what, you guys should really do is if you like, I'll give your name to them and say, look, if you guys do a great job as promoters and you can get certain number of people to come, you can get huge discounts. So think about that and your reach from the Hallowed Earth podcast, and see if you guys can't. And again, I'll bring that up to them if you would like, and see if that can work.
You just broke Rachel. Do you see her freeze? Like,
I think we might be interested.
My husband, I was getting upset with him because he kept talking about all of the things that you're gonna do.
Stop teasing me.
And then I was like, stop it, stop what you're doing right now. It's torture.
Yeah, don't talk to me until you've got the tickets in hand.
Okay, it's really terrible. You'll never want to go. The food is terrible. It's disgusting. It's not much fun at all. And I've only been there about 15 times. It's really terrible.
Oh my gosh! So we're gonna do an investigation all together when we're there, right?
Yes, you did say that you guys are gonna do an investigation.
There's lots of places where we specifically have the place to ourselves to do an investigation. I mean, this is at least half the people that come are looking for that experience. The other half are kind of like vampire, historical literature kind of people. So, from 15 to 40 people on the trip, there's lots of time for these people to do these. We've had some people bring, what are those little machines called?
The robots?
Say it?
Boxes?
Yes. Picking up the recordings. I mean, it's great. And there's lots of room for that to go on.
All right. So anyone who's new to the podcast, if you are wondering how to support us and our journey,
there you go. Start a GoFundMe.
This would be a good way.
Help us, we're poor.
Girls do
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
we need a UK trip.
We
To
do.
Tasmania. I'll go. That's
Yeah.
whenever I'm on another podcast and I'm talking about, they love to say, well, what's your bucket list location to investigate? I say Bran Castle every single time. Because it just is.
Yeah, and so here's just again for the record, Bram Stoker never went to Transylvania,
Right.
but in 3 of the books that he investigated in the London Library, and we know the books because he listed them all in the back of his notes. So he was that detailed, even in a work of fiction, that we know these 3 books, they had sketches of Bran Castle. And it's the only castle that had sketches in any of the books. It's a magnificent castle. That's why back in the 1800s, these adventurers sketched it. And so Bram saw this, and the way he described the layout of the exterior part of the castle, it's no question it's Bran Castle. Now, there's not a whole lot of Vlad the Impaler in this castle. Okay, just to set the record straight, Vlad was a prince of Wallachia, and this castle's in Transylvania, right on the border, actually. So there is a chance that Vlad would have stopped in the castle while he was passing from one side of the border to another, or while he was imposing taxes on the people passing between. But there's no record of him ruling from there. Doesn't matter that the other Dracula, Count Dracula, Bram put him there. But when he needed to accurately describe the inside of the castle, he described the inside of Slane's castle in Cruden Bay. So again, he merged these things together. And I've been to the location where the fictional castle is. It's not Bran, and it's not Scotland. It's in the other side of Romania, very close to the Moldavian border, very close to, as Bram described it, Borgo Pass and Bukovina. And he actually even wrote lines of longitude and latitude in his notes to show us exactly where this extinct volcano is, where he placed his fictional castle. Just move things around to suit the story.
It's like he cited sources to the letter, crossing all the T's, like everything was there. That's great.
That's the legal side of Bram. That's the guy who, when he got out of college, he worked as a clerk in the Petty Sessions legal department. That's his detailed oriented brain, while his imagination was working in the other side of his brain.
Yeah. He's one of those whole brain guys.
Yep.
Used it all. Oh my gosh. I feel like we have a million questions. What to know?
Unfortunately.
We need a part 2.
Well, we need part 2, especially since at some point, when A.G. Mock and I are ready to talk about our collaborative effort together, we need to come back on your show and talk about it right here.
Yeah.
And I think we need to keep that powder dry for another date. But I look forward to that, because you guys have been great to chat with. And I know you've got to know my good buddy, AG, who's moved to Nashville. But yeah, we've got something interesting brewing in the next couple of months that we'd love to share with you at the right time.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yes.
Well, we were so excited to jump in. I forgot our weekly ritual. So if you would be so kind, we pull a tarot card every week.
Okay.
So if you will play along with us and just tell me
when to stop, or you can shuffle.
Stop.
Okay.
Yes.
And stop.
Okay. Ooh, we got cups again, girls.
Yay!
Yeah, we got the 6 of Cups.
Ooh.
Give yourself the compassion you were never given.
Oh man.
I know it.
Easy one.
What is that? Are we all drinking? Is that what you're talking about now?
Listen, however you feel compassion. So, what does our little guide say? Cups, 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 cups. 6 of Cups. No one has ever bought me flowers before, the witch says to the florist. And it suddenly dawned on me that there's absolutely nothing stopping me from buying them for myself. You see, she's decided that she's no longer letting other people's past treatment of her determine how she treats herself in the here and now. If someone ever made you think that you didn't deserve good things, then you're being called upon to unlearn those ideas because they're simply not true, nor have they ever been true. Not only are you worthy of having good things, but you're worthy of having every incredible thing you've ever wanted and to do something nice for yourself today.
Like a trip.
I can buy myself flowers.
Exactly. But we can also take ourselves to England.
Yes,
Right. We've
exactly.
earned it. For
You
sure.
can. Hey,
That's
here's some trivia. Pamela Coleman Smith. Does that ring a bell to any of you? Pamela Coleman Smith. She was the first artist of the Smith-Waite tarot cards.
Oh.
She was a young lady that Bram Stoker saved off the street, gave her a job at the Lyceum Theater. He brought her along to help paint sets at the Lyceum Theater. She came on some of their travels with them to America. He kind of brought her under his wing as a, just a sort of this orphaned little girl that needs help. And she painted some interesting pictures of Bram, some little sort of cartoony pictures. He employed her to color 5 pages of The Lair of the White Worm. So if you're a listener, you can go and look Pamela Coleman Smith, Lair of the White Worm. You'll see her original artwork in this book, the last book Bram Stoker wrote.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta
Oh my gosh.
There's another connection to the occult through Bram and one of these many little branches.
And our
Yeah.
other Holly in the comments had a great point. She said that she's definitely going to be watching this again actually that's Aim Symes.
Yeah.
Saying they want to watch a replay of this because you shared so much information. I'm like,
I know.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch this like 5
I
times.
know, me
myself.
too.
And yes, Holly, looking forward to part 2. Yes. This has been a
Yeah.
wealth of
I
information.
was gonna say put those on the screen if you could, so that he could see them too.
Yeah.
So you can follow me on dacrestoker.com. I've got to update that website, but I do Facebook, Dacre Stoker Author, and Instagram, Dacre Stoker Author. And my wife and I run the Bram Stoker Estate website. And we've got our cousins who are in England, direct descendants of Bram's. We're training them to be more involved in family stuff. So follow us on socials and, come on one of the trips with us because as I said, this Halloween, running them with Mysterious Adventures Travels, and also next year to Whitby in the springtime, and Transylvania with a company called Experience Transylvania. So 2 different companies I work with to take people to magical mystery tours.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Next
Whitby
year
in
we'll
the
be on
spring.
that.
Yeah.
I said next year we'll be on those.
Yes.
Well, you should start now. And I mean this seriously. If you guys can create a following enough to say, come with you, the organizers, I can tell the organizers, because they do this with sort of influencers. If you can get, 5 or 6 people, you guys as leaders can get a big discount.
So to everyone who's watching right now, please
Yes.
remember to like, subscribe, and share to every single person you've ever met and anyone you see in the grocery store.
That's right.
To get the word out there, because
Imagine that, leading the Hallowed Earth podcast all around England, Whitby, and then over to Transylvania. That would be so cool. And you could even do some of your podcasts from over there.
yes, please, manifesting it. We're speaking into an existence, and everyone listening, please send your good vibes as well, because we want this to happen desperately.
Yeah, because this is going to happen. So you can either be a part of it or you're not a part of it, but it's happening.
It is. I already shipped this.
That's right.
Oh, you've been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Till next time. That's it. There'll be a next time, ladies. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dacre.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.